Hello, this is Angela Anderson. In this video, I'll be showing you how to create this floral chalkboard painting using acrylic paints. This is a part 2 of a 2-part series. In part 1, I showed some different brushstroke techniques, and in this video, we'll combine all of those brushstrokes to make this floral wreath. I'm starting with a 12-inch canvas covered with black gesso, but if you don't have gesso, you can use black paint, that's fine. So to start out, I just placed a plate and traced around it to create my circle for my wreath, and then placed a smaller circle on the inside there to give me some boundaries for my flowers to go in, and maybe made a couple of circles in there to indicate where I might want some of my flowers to go. So I'm going to start out by making some pink flowers with Quinacridone Magenta and some pink that I mixed with white and magenta. And I'm double loading an angle brush. It's a 3/8 inch angle brush. And I just find a little spot on my palette to blend them a little bit. You want the light color on the tip and the darker color on the back end. And then we're just going to do some of the petal strokes that I showed in my first video with the brush strokes. And we're just going to stack them and point all of the centers, the back end of the brush toward the center. And I got this one a little bit crowded. I didn't leave room for my 5th petal, but that's all right. We kind of fit it in there. And you just want to keep stacking petals. I did 3 of these pink ones. You'll notice going forward that I did that a lot. I did either 3 flowers or 5 flowers. That kind of helps unify your painting. This is a little bit of red with some yellow and white to make it a little bit more opaque. It's Hansa yellow medium, Pyrrole red, and white. And I'm just setting my brush down and making some modified comma strokes. They're kind of like teardrop strokes and comma strokes both. And just setting the brush down and pulling it toward the center while I lift. And it creates these little daisies. We want to do 2 more of these. And then I switched to a filbert, and I mixed up some of the red with white to make this kind of a creamy, soft red color. This is a 1/4 inch filbert, and I'm doing a leaf stroke. I'm setting the brush down and twisting it slightly toward the center. And if you want to make a little dot for your center so you know where to aim your petals, you can do that. And I kind of clustered these around my larger flowers, put a couple of them out on their own, but did them next to the yellow flowers because I thought they'd look nice against that yellow. Now I mixed up some purple with the Quinacridone Magenta and Ultramarine blue and some white. I'm going to make some tulip-shaped flowers. These are a long leaf stroke, so you're going to set your brush down and twist it to a point as you drag it. Set it down, twist it to a point as you drag it. Now you can use your round brush instead if you don't want to use the filbert for this, so either one could do this stroke. And I did 3 of those as well next to the yellow flowers. Now I mixed up some turquoise with phthalo blue, phthalo green, and a little bit of white. I'm just doing little teeny tiny thin brush strokes with the number 2 round, pulling those toward the center, kind of like we did our yellow daisies, only these are just on a smaller scale. And these are kind of like little blue aster flowers or something like that. You don't have to be particularly careful. These are really fun. And then I did some little bit larger ones with the phthalo green and phthalo blue mixture. Had just a tiny bit of white in it, but it's pretty dark. And I'm using a 1/4" flat brush for this. It'll give it a different look to have those kind of more angular ends of the petals. Then I mixed up some phthalo green and white with a 3/4" flat brush and did some large, long leaf strokes. Then I used some Hansa yellow, phthalo green, and a little bit of white to make a bright, vivid green. I'm going to use this to make some little fern-like leaves. And I started out with this larger brush to do the stems, but then I switched over to a 1/2" flat brush so that I can make some little smaller leaves on it. And the way that I did the leaves is I set the brush down, pointed towards the center stem, and just pressed down and let the leaf shape, let the brush do the work. So you just kind of set it down and drag it toward the center a little bit. It's on its angle, so it's on its chiseled edge there, pointing towards the center and kind of angled down a little bit. And the harder you press, the larger your leaf will be. So the ones towards the bottom are a little bit more pressure. Now I've mixed up some burnt sienna and white, and I'm making some little stems for some berries. And I ended up making these stems a little bit longer, so you can refer back. If you're going to do this project, I would watch the whole thing and then go back and do it, because there's a couple of things that I changed toward the end. I made a few editing changes. So this is a gray that I made with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and used it to kind of give it a neutral color. It helps when you're doing so many vivid colors to have colors like the brown and the gray to sort of neutralize and give them something to play off of. So I added this in just some of the open spaces, kind of tucked them in here and there, just trying to kind of fill in some of the gaps. And then I used some of that green, or that gray, to make a gray green with the phthalo green, and added a little bit of white, and then I added a little bit of the yellow too. I think there was the yellow oxide. I'm making sort of a fern-like leaf shape with the number 2 round. I'm just doing several small little brush strokes all stacked up, pointing angled out from the center branch. Now the berries are red, they're Pyrrole red, and the Quinacridone magenta with some white. And that makes a real bright cherry red color. And using the same color palette and mixing the colors will really help unify your painting too. Instead of introducing a new red here, we just mixed one from the reds we've already used. So, and I'm just kind of plopping my brush down here to create some little dots for the centers of these berries. And these white flowers are the white mixed with a little bit of yellow oxide to make an ivory. And I just fit in a few of these here and there, tucked them in around in some of the empty spaces. And then I mixed up some more green with some yellow and phthalo. And I'm using my leaf stroke and my filbert to fill in a bunch of little leaves here and there. I think I added a little bit of blue to this green too, to give it a little bit different tone. The centers of the yellow flowers are the Quinacridone magenta with a little bit of white. And then I did these centers with gray, but then I went back later and changed them to a phthalo blue center. So you'll see that here later on in the video. I decided that that dark gray was a little bit too close to the black background color. I'm adding the darker gray stems to these leaves, and you can add a lot more details like to your larger leaves if you want. You could put stems in or leaf vein details in all of them, but I didn't. I chose not to. I just kind of left them plain. This is yellow for the centers of our pink, little pinkish red flowers there. If you make a mistake, you can just wipe it off. You can see I kind of decided to go with several little dots instead of a solid dot. I did several little small dots. Then I mixed up some of the orange with my red and yellow to do the centers of my turquoise flowers there, my darker turquoise ones. Then I used that ivory color to put little teeny tiny dots in the centers of my big pink flowers. You just make these random, touch the very tip, load your brush thick with paint, and then touch the very tip very lightly, and it'll just kind of make these little dots for you. And for the centers of the purple flowers, I used pink for the stems and then little white dots for the tips. It really adds a lot of character to those. I love the look of that with the little dots. Really cute. I decided to do some ultramarine blue. This color really made everything kind of vibrant, really made everything pop, so I decided to use it quite a bit. And I even in the later, I went back and I elongated some of these kind of clusters that I made randomly and kind of made them a little bit longer and more pointed. So you can see that if you later on in the video here. Now I've made an olive green with the ultramarine blue and yellow. I'm using the number 2 round to make some little dot leaves around the outside of the little stems there. And I decided to add a little bit more of the red berries down here, and I made this a little bit longer later on in the video. Added even more stems to this section. And then I decided to use some turquoise. So that's the phthalo green, phthalo blue, and white to make some small leaves. Now to do my lettering, I used a 1/2 inch flat brush and white. And I did this freehand, but if you want to, you can print this out and practice it on tracing paper before you transfer it on and paint it. You don't want to turn your brush when you're doing calligraphy. You want to move your whole hand, and that will help give you that kind of thick and thin lines look that I was going for here. If you don't want to do this freehand, you could leave this part out, or you could even use a stencil. There's lots of great stencils out there that will help you create this look. But it's great practice, so I would suggest at least trying it on tracing paper. Now I did use the liner brush and did some little curly cues with some bright, vivid green, yellow, and phthalo green. And we're almost done at this point. This was kind of the end of my first section video, and then I decided I wanted to kind of mess up the edges a little bit. I figured it just looked a little bit too kind of controlled and perfect. So I decided to kind of add a few more details. So here I've got a darker purple that I mixed up. Just adding a little bit of detail to my tulip flowers there with the comma stroke. And now I've got phthalo blue, phthalo green, and some white, and I'm going to make a turquoise here again. And I use that color to darken up those dark turquoise flowers. I feel like they were a little bit dark, so I just went back over them to this little bit brighter turquoise color. And I added an extra one at the bottom of the canvas as well. Then I mixed up some orange with the red and yellow and made the centers for these. Touch those up as well. Now here's where I'm making the stems of the red berries a little bit larger. I've got my number 4 round. You can use a liner brush or a smaller brush for this if you want. I'm going to make these stems a little bit longer and give them a little bit more berries. just because I just felt like I was staying too kind of close to the edges of my wreath. So I just really wanted to kind of make it look a little bit more natural and naturalistic. And so these berries are kind of sticking out on their own, and I decided to add something down there. I wasn't sure yet what I wanted to do, but I also added a few more berries up here to this one to make it a little bit more messy as well. So this is the fun part of design. I mean, really, I could have left it as is, but I'm making some choices here just to kind of give it a different look, and they're subtle changes. But I decided to go ahead and add another little leaf, a large leaf with the phthalo green and white to match those two that are on either side. So I put a large leaf in this open area here. And then I made some of my other leaves a little bit larger to kind of match, since all my leaves were looking kind of small. There's a couple places where I decided to just go ahead and make them a little bit bigger. There and up at the top. Then I decided to round out that one there, those, so that they were a little bit more, had a different shape to them. Now it's starting to come together a little bit more, I think. I'm making some more of that olive green with the yellow and ultramarine blue. And I'm going to enlarge some of my ferns and make some more little fern shapes. So I do the large, long stem, and then just plop my brush down on either side to make these little dots. Those are really fun to do. Then I enlarge some of the ones that I already had just to make them stand out a little bit more. And then I enlarged some of the blue sections too. Elongated some of those dot clusters so that they had some direction to them. Kind of improves the flow of the painting. And I decided to brighten up my yellow flowers. So I went back over those with the second coat. That was yellow with a little tiny bit of red and some white in it. And here again, you're just setting your brush down real firm and then pulling it toward the center. And I tried not to do too much in the center because I wanted to leave that kind of a see-through, the black seam showing through in the center, so I didn't want to mess that up. You want to leave a little bit of space between your petals. And then I made my centers of those flowers a little bit bigger with that Quinacridone magenta and white. Make them a little bit more vibrant. And here's where I changed the centers of the blue flowers to the phthalo blue and white. And this was a white and yellow and green, very vivid green. And I'm using my flat brush to make these little rounded petals. I'm just pivoting just a little bit to create these rounded leaves. You could do this with the liner brush or a number 4 brush if you wanted to. You didn't have to do this with the flat brush, but it's good practice. And then I decided to put in a few more random leaves kind of sticking out away from the edges to give it movement. If you notice that I kind of tried to keep each side, the leaves pointing toward the outside and upwards. So each side kind of has a flow. The flowers and the leaves are all pointing outwards and then up. as they come around the corners there. And the ones at the bottom are sort of mashed up. Some going some way, some going the other way. So anyhow, that is the finished project there. I really loved this project. It was really fun. I hope you learned some new brush strokes. Hope you try some of these. They're great practice, and this is a really fun way to put them all together and do really lovely painting with them. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out my other videos, and please subscribe and share this with your friends. I really appreciate you watching today. And please, if you try this project, I'd love to see it, so you can share it with me on my Thankful Art page on Facebook. That is in the links in the description below. Thanks again. Bye.